if there is one aggressor, it's going to be China.
Yeah.
So the level of paranoia with the Chinese leadership, because one thing the Chinese leadership lack is trust within themselves and with others. They don't trust anybody else, and others don't trust them. So if there is no trust, it's very difficult to maintain relationship over longer time, because you always live in suspicion as to who is going to do what. So that is why when I checked with Chinese scholars, they said that not more than 3 Politburo members can meet together without the permission of the president. This convention was there, but it was reinforced more during Xi Jinping's time. And what does that say? That manifests that they are afraid of internal coup.
Hello and welcome to The Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Vindadran, and this evening we have with me the Sikyong of the Central Tibet Administration in India, Mr. Pempa Sering. Sir, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So, we've been reading some reports about renewed Chinese efforts to culturally assimilate or sinicize young Tibetans. And I understand that while earlier there were reports of mass incarceration of Tibetans, is this a new, more recent development?
No, it has been happening over the years, but now it is becoming more intensified under President Xi Jinping. At one time, we used to really fear demographic aggression because it's only 6-7 million Tibetans on that 2.5 million square kilometers of land, and only 6-7 million Tibetans, and it's 1.4 billion. I mean, and we thought that Tibet would be completely overwhelmed by the majority Han Chinese. But maybe also because China's population is also declining, and it's not possible for every Chinese to live on the Tibetan plateau. You need that lung, and they come only to those areas where they can make money in towns and cities. They don't go to rural areas where they have to do hard labor for livelihood. So that has not happened as much as we feared. So the next assault from the Chinese government is now, how do we turn every other nationality into a Chinese? So that is under Xi Jinping, one nation, one language, one culture kind of policy at the expense of all other nationalities. So you're striking at the very root of the identity of people. In the case of Tibetans, our language comes from India. Our Buddhism also came from India. So we are an extension of Indian culture. We are proud to be repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom, because we must have translated all the available Buddhist texts into Tibetan in 8th century. And thereby we are proud to be a custodian of one part of ancient Indian wisdom. Now, China is striking at that, taking Tibetan children away from their families, put them in the boarding school. So we are talking about 1 million children between the age of 6 to 18 in boarding school out of 7 million total population. And the last time we checked, below the age of 6, between the age of 3 to 6 also, it used to be several thousands in boarding schools, nearby boarding schools. Now it has gone up to 150,000. So the age limit is also coming down. And then the focus is more on Chinese language, Chinese version of history, Chinese communist ideology, and how to maintain their loyalty to the Communist Party. So thereby you are completely brainwashing the younger generations of Tibetans. And that's why when I spoke at this seminar yesterday also, I mentioned, of course, it is very detrimental for the Tibetan population if this continues for another several decades. But at the same time, this also has its security implications on India, because Tibetans always looked up to India as the land of Aryavrat, the land of the Buddha. And we have this huge respect for India and Indian people. And then, of course, the government and people of India have been very kind since we came into exile. So that equation will also change. if people change.
So tell me, in this situation where you are seeing so many of your young people being culturally, their Tibetan identity being wiped out, what would you expect from India to do, given the fact that relations with China are not good? What would you expect from India?
No, relations with China being good or not depends on who is the more belligerent party. In this case, China is the belligerent party. India has always been a very defensive country. So I always said, if there is something that we know about China, having lived on that plateau for so many centuries as neighbor with China, China respects only strength, not weakness. So they have, over the years, tried to contain India through its policies or support with, or its relation with Pakistan over many decades. We live in India. We know how India's foreign policy have been so centric on Pakistan and Jammu Kashmir. Now, the whole equation has changed. India is a growing power. India has the strength to stand up on its position. And India is standing up to its position and its values, democratic values. So then only you command respect from the Chinese. So that is a very important development that has taken place over the last few years. And
so do you expect that as India's strength and power grows, it will influence the Chinese to perhaps talk to India more, and then indirectly perhaps influence their policy in Tibet?
My analysis of why China's belligerence on the Indian border, or saber-rattling with Taiwan, or assertiveness in the South China Sea, or with Senkaku or Daewoo Islands with Japanese, is that they keep these hotspots burning. Because you look at Ladakh, the place in Galwan area, except for some greeneries on the banks of the river, nothing there. Mountains. So what are you fighting for, actually? So, of course, Indian analysts say these are ways to contain India, that India does not grow beyond certain thing. But at the same time, my thinking is that China has become very insecure today. So everything that's coming out of the Chinese leader's mouth is security. And that also creates a sense of fear in the Chinese people's mind that, again, the foreigners are going to come and invade China, which is not really the truth. So they try to create that atmosphere. And if there is a threat to the survival of the Communist Party, depending on the severity of that threat, they will attack one of these places. So till such a time, I don't see any immediate danger from the Chinese side, because their economy is in the doldrums. Starting from the rural governments to the banking sector to the housing collapse, and the debt economies that are not working, BRI programs that are not going as they expected. And their foreign exchange reserves will also come down if the GDP growth is not as much as it used to be. And if they don't have too much trade surplus with other countries, they don't have the reserve to splurge it on Belt and Road Initiative or space technology or artificial intelligence or military equipment. As I say, China needs to be more introspective. They point fingers at everybody else and say they are trying.
Everybody else is at fault.
A problem for China, but whereas China is fueling military expense of all the other countries. Look at Japan. Prime Minister Kishida is now very strong on spending on defense, and Taiwan has to spend. There's no choice for them. Australia is investing in nuclear submarines, even though they are that far away. Now, India has to spend more. We all know how much India is spending on infrastructure development, and the new defense ties with France or Germany or US. But India is also in a very difficult position because of the growing Russia-China relations. And if China were to attack India today, I think India would be in a very difficult position with spare parts and the military supplies not coming through from Russia. So it's a very new scenario that is developing new dynamics and equations coming up. So it's very interesting times.
So I'd like to touch upon the point you made that Xi Jinping and the Communist Party appear insecure. Is this, what are they insecure about? I think the primary focus is internal, isn't it? A mass public uprising against the Communist Party. We saw some evidence of that during the COVID time, you know, not too long ago, I think last year itself. Is that the primary fear here?
I think because nobody is going to attack China from outside. India is not going to attack China. NATO is not going to attack China. None of the neighboring states have the capacity or the will to attack China. So if there is one aggressor, it's going to be China. So the level of paranoia with the Chinese leadership, because one thing the Chinese leadership lack is trust within themselves and with others. They don't trust anybody else, and others don't trust them. So if there is no trust, it's very difficult to maintain relationship over longer time, because you always live in suspicion and who's going to do what. So that is why when I checked with Chinese scholars, they said that not more than 3 Politburo members can meet together without the permission of the president. This convention was there, but it was reinforced more during Xi Jinping's time. And what does that say? That manifests that they are afraid of internal coup. But then now the things have changed, unlike the previous Politburo, where you have normally they keep people from the former presidents, like Jiang Zemin's people, Hu Jintao's people. Now that Jiang Zemin is no more, Hu Jintao's people should be there to protect him. That is the system. That's how it works. Now, this time, it's all his people, 7 people. So it's one hand you have Xi Jinping and the 6 other people. And it's supposed to be all his own people. So if you listen to the Chinese people's reaction to the developments in Russia with Putin and Wagner, Prigozhin, there were some YouTubers in China who did a very good analysis of how people viewed that. And China showed that for only a few hours when it started. And when the story started evolving around Prigozhin's relationship with Putin over 30 years, being an inmate, chef, this, that, and then a close ally of Putin rising up against the Iron Man, as Chinese people see, or even Xi Jinping sees Putin as a very strong man, Iron Man, and that image being shattered has its implication on the minds of the Chinese people as to whether there would be a future Prigozhin against Xi Jinping or not. So those questions are, and then suddenly they stopped the coverage by the state media, and there are no other media that can cover that, or they showed it only after the Prigozhin decided to leave to Belarus for exile. So that is the level of control on information we are talking about, which is taken for granted in the free world.
But tell me, this idea of a coup, this suspicion of a coup, is it realistic given, Xi Jinping's control over the system? And coup from where? From within the party or from the army?
Well, this could be varied, So coup, the first thing I said about having to secure his permission for more than 3 Politburo, then it becomes a majority. And the second level is during Xi Jinping's time, particularly in the last 4 years, he has been changing every general, just like what Mao used to do when he changed the Eastern Theater general to the Western, swapped the job. Similarly, Xi Jinping is also transferring all the generals every single year. He makes sure that the generals don't build strong relationship with the cadres. So that also is a paranoia to rule out military coup. So it could be from anywhere, political, from the public. I would also, again, China is the only country that spends more money on internal security than external security, particularly on security apparatus and the apps that they use, like electronic identification, geolocation, now even DNA profiling, iris scanning, and all that. So that itself manifests a deep distrust between the rulers and the ruled. And now according to this YouTuber, she was also talking about the world's largest army in the world, in terms of size. So these army people, at the initial stage of the formation of Communist Party, the party used to dictate who they can marry and who they can date with. And later there was a little more freedom. People could choose their life partners. But now this is being reimposed.
Even marriage
now, as to who you should marry, you can marry, or who you can date with. That is what the YouTuber was saying, and she sounded very factual about this.
So what is their definition or meaning of who is most compatible with the other? Is it loyalty to the party? Is that what matters?
Which means to say that, of course, they will even the spouses or the people that you are dating, they will have to undergo background checks to be eligible to marry an army man, so that all these whatever secrets of the government does not go out. So now with the counter-espionage law also, everything is so contradictory. They want investment, but then you have the counter-espionage law. And just this morning, there was a report about a Chinese reporter just reporting about China's economy and comparing that with the depression of the 1930s. And he's now out there.
So what are your resources or the scholars you mentioned earlier? What are they telling you about the Chinese economy? Is it really going down?
Of course, there are a lot of apprehensions on the quality of Chinese data. So they always hide something. Now they want to, in the free world, you can have access to all kind of data, and you can make your analysis of what is happening. And China is clamping down more, because now they make sure that all sensitive data that portray China as a weak economy, or economy not gaining traction, or the contraction of economy, and comparing with other situations when there were bad things, everything could be a cause for you to be arrested on the ground of national security and social stability, because all the laws that Chinese government frames are very, very ambiguous. It's not well defined. So anybody can take decision at every level, depending on whether you like that country or not, whether you like that company or not, whether you like that person or not. So it all depends, because on the one hand, they need the market. On the other hand, they put these restrictions. So everybody has to live in a kind of uncertainty. Even business people, they wonder, with the Japanese, they have already arrested some 17, 18 of their people already. And what does it say? How longer will Japan be able to pursue with this policy of always have to confronting their people being arrested and seeking their release while running the business at the same time? But that is why Japan has gone for +1.
China +1,
China +1 solution. So, which many other countries might also follow, because there are a lot of problems with decoupling, too much investment. So that is why when people tell us, oh, the dragon is biting us, then we tell them, who fed the dragon? And we were not able to tame the dragon. And then you say that the dragon is biting at you, and you're still feeding the dragon. You see so many European leaders, from Chancellor Scholz to President Macron to von der Leyen to Baerbock to Pistorius to all major leaders going to China. Now New Zealand Prime Minister is there. President Lula also went. So you have the African Union participating in human rights discussions in Tibet with SCO members. So all these are happening, aligning, realigning, alignment, and all these developments are happening. But then what is the message for Russia, for China, for Europe? The main concern is Ukraine. And then you have this very deep relationship between Russia and China, whereas China needs European market, because most of the European countries have trade deficit with China, including India.
True.
India has a huge trade deficit with China, particularly in the last 1-2 years. It has gone up from, the business volume has gone up from 79 to 118 billion or so. So as long as China have this excess of foreign exchange reserve, they will splurge it and they will use it against you. So you cannot complain that the dragon is biting at you, because you are feeding the same dragon.
You think it's realistic, a military coup in China? You think it's...
No, I think anything can spark anything, because right now the paranoia from the government is forcing the government to take certain steps which again constricts the freedom of the people. So the more you constrict people's freedom, the more people are going to be wary of the government, not trust the government. And then add to that the economic woes of the government, where you have, we already mentioned about rural banking, housing and all that. And then the falling contraction in the economy. So that is going to fuel, when it comes to livelihood, when it comes to the stomach. You're already talking about 11.6 million young Chinese between the age of 17 to 24 who are unemployed. And for one, some of them have even gone to foreign countries, paid huge fees to study and come back. And then suddenly you are asked to go to the rural areas and work on the farm. It's just like, what deal?
Is that true? They've been asked to go to the rural areas?
There has been a lot of reports on that. They have not been, because the cities are not able to provide them with employment. So then the only alternative is go to the villages to work on the farms. And then having paid so much money, having spent so much time to study and try to seek a white-collar job, that is the Chinese dream. And then their dream is completely smashed now. And then 11.6 million may be small out of 1.4 billion, but when you take 11.6 million as a force to reckon with, they can create chaos. So if there is anything, economy is something that can really bring the Chinese back on their knees.
So let's get back to Tibet. Given China's economic situation, do you see perhaps going forward a certain relaxation of the strict rules that are following in Tibet? Do you see kind of pulling back of the Chinese state from, in the lives of ordinary Tibetans?
That looks very unlikely. If you look at the incremental repressive measures of the Chinese government, particularly during Xi Jinping's time, every amendment to available laws, prevailing laws, are being made more stricter, not looser. The indication could only come from those policies and programs. So what we see now, whether it's on control of the use of religious areas, or whether it's on control of the use of internet, so everything is becoming more and more stringent. That makes it more difficult for people to exercise their freedom. So it doesn't look very likely that under the present circumstances things are going to change, because Xi Jinping also have been saying that there is no need for us to change our system, because we have proven over the last 2-3 decades that we can have economic development under Communist Party. So that being a fact, they forget to look at every other aspect of human aspiration. Like, what are people longing to? Are they only looking for wealth or material wealth? Because for Chinese government, every problem, the solution is development, nothing else. So it's nothing to do with the religious aspirations of the people. Well, people have been deprived of this spirituality for the last so many decades. And now, materially, they are much more better than before. But then again, you have this spiritual vacuum. When Tibetan lamas go to Beijing, some of their patrons are communist leaders, military leaders. They do meet with them secretly. So even they have to wonder whether there is life after death or not, whether you believe in it or not, or whether you are religious or not. Ultimately, it boils down to that. Even Tao Ziyang, when he was dethroned and he had problems, when he died, he sent his son for His Holiness to pray for his father's soul. So you have all these contradictions it's not as ironed out as, as we tend to see from the outside.
And this thing about the Dalai Lama's reincarnation, the party is heavily involved in trying to get a solution.
No, they are not a solution. They are more into creating future problems. So they know that Tibetan people are very religious, deeply devout Buddhists. So if they can control the Dalai Lama, then they can control the Tibetan population. So they are not bothered about the living 14th Dalai Lama, but they are more bothered about the yet to come 15th Dalai Lama.
Do you think they've already identified somebody, some little boy?
Not possible. They cannot. They cannot. That is why when I was asked by some foreign diplomats as to you don't seem to have a process in place regarding His Holiness selection and all that. That is for something for His Holiness to decide, because it's His Holiness who is going to be reborn. I cannot decide as a CTA leader or any other government for that matter. And this is a purely religious and ritualistic matter, so it is best left to people whom His Holiness entrusts to carry on the responsibility. So my message to the Chinese government is, have you not learned enough lesson from the Panchen Lama saga? Because you have three boys. Out of the three boys, one was selected by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then he was abducted, and along with his family, we still don't know whether he is alive or not. Even if he's alive, whether he has been given the traditional education to carry on his responsibilities or not. And then you have the Chinese select Panchen Lama. When he was sent to Tibet, you have to pay the people to go listen to him, meet him. You have to force the civil servants to make it compulsory for them to see the Chinese selected Panchen Lama. So you don't see this respect from the Tibetan people. They just call him he's a Tibetan boy, of course, they just call him another political leader, not respected as Panchen Lama. So you don't see pictures of the Chinese selected Panchen Lama to be sold on the market, in the market. You see only the 10th Panchen Lama. So that is how Tibetans show their displeasure or not accepting the Chinese choice. Because a government that does not believe in religion or spirituality and interfering in the process of selection itself is quite, I don't know, such a contradiction that it's difficult to place it in a very realistic or rational sense. But that is what Chinese government always does. And my response to this was that China cannot handle unpredictability, just like with Trump. That's why His Holiness also saying it could be a rebirth, it could be a emanation, it could be a woman when he's asked. So China is confused. So that's why right now the decision that His Holiness has taken is very wise, because once His Holiness decide, then they will use. China has all the resources, financial and human. But then they will try to influence the international community to follow their, but they cannot just appoint one person. There has to be a time.
So last question. You deal with the Indian government. What is it that you would ask of them, or in your discussions with them, what is it that you seek? I mean, whether in terms of the Tibetan diaspora here, what is it that you would wish for them to...
The Indian government and the people of India have been very kind to us. We have our historical relationship. As I mentioned before, our first king of Tibet came from India. So we have all this. We feel like an extension. And I tell our friends, I look a little different because I'm a Tibetan, but our mind is all the same. It is shaped by Indian philosophy and thinking. So humanitarian issues, the Indian government has been very, very kind. When it comes to political issues concerning China, earlier when that question used to be posed to His Holiness always used to say India is overcautious. Now I say we can remove the over, but still cautious. And I think in international politics and looking at the national interests of government of India, there needs to be due diligence and discerning power to take the right decision. But then if they can be a little more assertive about their position on Tibet, like the boundary issue, I say India is not saying it, but the fact that India still uses Indo-Tibetan Border Police and Indo-Tibetan Border Force, not changing it to Sino-Indian Border Police, that itself underlines or underscores what India really wishes it to be. So, but then His Holiness has taken on this middle way policy because he thinks more about the common interest rather than individual interest. And if we can have a non-violent, negotiated, mutually beneficial, lasting solution to the Sino-Tibet conflict on that plateau through the middle way or genuine autonomy for Tibetans, then I tend like to believe that even the border issues should be resolved. So if that happens, then there will be much more peace and stability, because we have played the role of a buffer historically between the two most populous nations in the world. There was never ever a war between China and India because of Tibet, and Tibetans have so much respect for Indians that there's never ever been a war. So we are willing to play the role of a bridge in future if there is a resolution to the Sino-Tibet conflict and promote more stability in the region.
So on that hopeful note, Pepa Sering, thank you very much for speaking to Spread News Global.
Thank you.
And I hope we can have many more such conversations in future.
Thank you so much, Surya.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
That's all we have for you now on The Gist. Do tune in for more such conversations going forward. Thank you very much. Good night.